talk on this channel about something that I call forward motion. And forward motion is a term that I really borrowed from the great pianist and jazz educator, Hal Galper. He uses it in a very specific way in his fantastic book, Forward Motion, but I use it in a slightly more loose and vague way normally, basically to mean things in music kind of flow towards a destination. So, for instance, a dominant chord will resolve to a major chord, or a line will resolve to chord tones in a target chord, or things of that nature, really. And I think it's a useful framework to think in, because I think we have a tendency to think about either what we've just done or what we're doing at that moment, rather than thinking about what's going to come up in a second or so. So, and I think that kind of understanding time from a number of different perspectives is actually quite important to become a musician of any kind. It doesn't matter whether you're a jazz musician or a classical performer or in some other tradition. I think like that perception, multi-level perception of time, is actually really important to cultivate. So forward motion can work at many levels. For instance, you can say, okay, I want to get into this place by the end of this chorus. I want to get into this place by the end of this solo. I want to get into this place by the end of this bar. Different levels of detail in your understanding of music. Anyway, this is probably a bit philosophical. I'm going to show you something very straightforward, hopefully, and something that most people will be able to grasp right away. And this is not something that was really shown to me. It's something which I've kind of learnt by listening. And this is how we phrase chords. So the other day I was working on Blues for Alice with a student, and Blues for Alice has a lot of chords. I'll put a chart up so you can see just how many chords it's got. And the progression moves somewhat like this. So nobody would actually play it that way, okay? Because that sounds robotic. I'm just literally just playing the chords without any kind of emphasis or phrasing or musicality. I'm just going dun, 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 dun. In fact, and this might not necessarily be that weird to anybody who's spent some time looking into jazz, but we actually have little modules within this progression that we can kind of group together. So start with an F major chord. And we play this 2-5-1, and in the actual changes it should be E minor 7, A7 flat 9, D minor. But it doesn't really matter. We can just do a ordinary minor 2-5 today. Going to D minor. And there's G7, which is kind of like a sort of bridging chord, and then we get this 2-5 going into B flat 7, and then these 2-5s, and then it resolves to F, and then. So you'll sort of start to kind of break it up a little bit. Here's how I'd actually phrase the progression. Notice how I've broken up there, and I've actually even left some chords out. So I'm thinking about this, and this is not the only way to think about the phrasing of the chord progression within the song, within the tune. But it's one way, and it's the way that I'd probably typically do it. So I'll start with the F major chord, being kind of a separate entity. See, now we get strongly, move down towards D minor. And whatever chord substitutions I use there, well, maybe not that one, but are going to emphasize that directionality of moving towards D minor. Then I have another passing chord in the middle, and I kind of ignore that. I kind of think of that as just like being an extension of D minor. G7 subs in for D minor quite well. And I'm mostly interested in what comes afterwards. So this C minor 7, F7, B flat 7 progression, right? Which puts us into bar 4. Now, I can put another passing chord between those two sections, between this 2-5-1 here and this 2-5-1 going into B flat 7. Notice I've just used a few subs already, right? So I'm thinking about that. Okay, like that, for instance. So in that case, I just added in a D flat minor passing chord between the D minor and the C minor. And that's not really a, sorry, I played a B flat major there instead of a B flat 7. That's not really a sort of decision based on any kind of harmonic thinking. Although, in fact, actually, there is a rule that you can replace a G7 with a D flat minor. It's sometimes known as the Herbie Hancock substitution, although Barry Harris also uses it. It's more that that progression just happens to be a way of, kind of filling in between those two progressions. And they have 2-5, and then yeah. So again, that seems to be to moving back to the 1. B flat minor moving back to A minor 7 is also the same as B flat minor moving back to F/A. It's very similar. So it's back to 1 really. And now thinking about that, moving back down to the 2. And maybe back to the turnaround, so back to A minor. So the whole thing together might sound something like this. And that has implications about the way we solo, for the way we solo on it. So if I play something like okay, which is fast, but it feels slower, right? The tempo is, which is not slow, okay? But it feels slower because I'm not having to play 8 million notes and describe every chord. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm phrasing with those chord phrases. So for instance, I play, slow down a little bit, F major. Okay, now I'm strongly going to move into D minor. Do that for a little bit, so I'm just on D minor. And then I move into B flat 7. And then I move from B flat minor using the minor plagal cadence, I go back into 1. Now I do that side slip. Now notice that when I do that, I'm not giving every chord equal weight. In fact, I'm changing it slightly from the harmonic rhythm in the chord progression. The harmonic rhythm in the chord progression is steady. If I go, you can put a little bit more weight on it, like in that example, but it's not. You are thinking of it resolving back down to, we did 2-5 as well, resolving back down to that 2-5, right? So that's often a tricky resolution to play, of course, because it's not resolving in the way of a traditional 2-5-1. It's just moving down a semitone. So you kind of have to practice that separately. On the guitar, it's actually very simple because we're very used to moving things up and down chromatically on the guitar neck, and it's a simple thing to do. You just move the shape. In this case, maybe an A minor 7 arpeggio. Okay. Okay. So hopefully, I mean, obviously I've practiced that tune a lot, so I don't want to give the impression that it's necessarily easy to be able to do that. It is easy for me to do that now, but by chopping up in this way, I've actually made the tune flow a lot better and a lot more kind of musically, I think, than if I was just playing every, change, like. Which I can't even do very well, but that's like the perpetual sort of scale exercise or whatever. I can't even do that very well. So, running like perpetual 8th notes over a chord progression. I suppose there's value in it in the sense that you can, build up a picture of how to play through a chord progression very well. But in practice, it's nothing I ever want to do musically that sounds like that, because it just sounds like a bunch of notes. I'd rather play phrases. So, let me take an example of like how you could break that up differently. So in that case, we might go. Okay, so what I'm doing there is I'm putting the gap in before the one chords. So that creates a different effect, quite interesting. Let me see if I can solo over that. Yeah? So that's a different feeling, right? Different phrasing. I'll do that again. So I'm putting a lot of stress there on the A flat minor chord, for instance, which I didn't do in the previous example.